Well, greetings, everybody. Welcome to House Discipleship Institute. I am your host, Elder Joshua Millar, bringing you an Intune with the Triune. Just want to say this: thank you for tuning in, and greetings to you all over the world. As last week we were discussing about perilous times, about how the world, and if you, the world nowadays will become lovers of themselves, boasters, braggers. Of themselves, have a form of godliness but deny the power. But what's interesting today is that the Father is actually taking you and I out of that realm, because He's calling you to be a holy people, a peculiar people, a holy nation unto Himself. And so what's interesting today is that as we continue to process, as we continue to develop, we were on the topic matter of, in this past Sabbath message, of justification, sanctification, and glorification. But one thing, as I was researching those words, we didn't speak on it just yet, but there was one particular word, which was glorification, I was researching. And what's interesting, it means glory. Obviously, in the word glorification, there's the word glory or esteem. Now, that word glory is in Hebrew is para, which is Hebrew 6286, which means glory, to glory in oneself, to shake a tree. And that actually threw me off a little bit. I said, out of all the things you got to, in glory, you have to shake a tree. Well, if some of you who have, grandparents or parents, or even today, if you're still in the horticultural arena of work, and you love to do that work, some of you may know that, when you have a walnut tree, you have to shake the tree in order to partake of its fruit. Just as the same in the scriptures, we are divine partakers of the Father's truth. This is the fruit of His Spirit, the whole word, from Revelation to Genesis. And yes, I said Revelation to Genesis because the Father starts everything from the end, and He does everything to the beginning. So in our eyes, we think that the Father's working backwards. No, He starts at the completed work, but He's just unveiling to you and I the finished work that you and I are. We are His sons, taking dominion in this earth. What's interesting is that the first fruit will produce after its own kind. Now, you got to hear what I'm saying in that note. The first fruit will produce after its own kind. So pay attention to the word glory and shaking a tree. This word in particular got to me because I was wondering, and Apostle Robert and Gonzalez and I, before breaking bread and before going on live, we just started breaking bread, and Revelation just poured out. And it was interesting how he said we are glory producers. Now, what's interesting is that if you look in the book of Genesis, there's actually a tree of life and a tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But what's interesting is I was just saying, what if those trees looked identical? What if those trees were identical twins? And we got off and we just started thinking, it was like, you know what, maybe you're right. Maybe we got to research more. Maybe the Father was showing us that there were two trees. They may have been identical. One had a form of godliness but denied the power, while the other one is the true substance of the Father, the tree of life. So in Genesis, we have the tree of life. And then if you look in the book of Psalms chapter 1, and let's turn to it right now, and pay attention to what I'm saying, why this revelation hit me, and it's going to, hopefully you're going to partake of it too and meditate on it. Because this isn't just something, this word, the scriptures of the Father when He speaks, isn't something that you just take lightly, even though His word is light. His word has substance, and every time He speaks, He will send out His word, and it will carry out and accomplish that which it was called to do and to fulfill. And I'm paraphrasing that, so listen to what it says. Verse 2, or let's start in verse 1, Psalms chapter 1. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of Yahuah, the Torah. And in His law he meditates day and night. Verse 3, pay attention. So as I said, in Genesis, we have a tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and the tree of life. And what's interesting in the Psalms, there's a hidden tree in there also. Nobody tells you about this because being born and raised as a Christian, nobody told me that in the book of Psalms, there's also a tree speaking. There's two trees, and I'm going to get to it. He shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of the water that brings forth its fruit in its season, whose leaves also shall not wither, and whatever he does shall not prosper. That was verse 3. Now, what's interesting is that if you look at Psalms 3, that's us right there. We become the tree because the more we partake of the fruit of the tree of life here hidden in the... Let's take it out of literal. If you're reading the book of Psalms and you haven't read the renewed covenant, and you're reading from Genesis all the way to Job, you're reading the first partaking of his divine nature. But when you come into Psalms, there's two hidden trees. You become the Word made flesh from Genesis to Job. And not many people want to do that today because we keep perpetuating that same lie, that same fruit that says, oh, we're new covenant believers. We don't need to read the Old Testament. We just need to stick with the new. But if you study the Father very well and you continue as a son, you're going to want to produce the same results as the Father. You're going to want to be like him. You're going to want to see like him. You're going to want to speak the same things he's speaking and do the same things he's doing. Homologio, that's the same Greek word for speak and do the same thing. Or in Hebrew, it's Shema, eyes to see, ears to hear. To see the Father, to hear the Father, and to do the Father's work. But if you go on to Psalms chapter 119, you actually begin to see that there's 22 letters right there hidden in the kingdom right there. And those 22 letters are actually a portion of who we are. Did you know that? So if you look from Psalms 119 verse 1 all the way to Psalms 176, it shows you the whole 22 Hebrew letters right there. And that is right there the book of life, or the tree of life. That is where we partake of it, because if we read the book of Psalms, it separates our souls, and therefore we rely mostly and enter in by his spirit, by his ruach. So it's funny how it says even in Psalms chapter 1 verse 1 and Psalms 119 verse 1, it said, blessed are the undefiled in the way, who walk in the law of Yahuah. Blessed are those who keep his testimonies, meaning his witnesses. You are his witness. Who seek him with their whole heart, meaning all their heart. Verse 3, they also do no iniquity. They walk in his ways. You have commanded us to keep your precepts diligently, meaning your word, your scriptures. But what's interesting today is that tree, when we get shaking up in the time and seasons, and Leviticus 23, yeah, we're going to go through a shaking, but we are to remain seated in heavenly places, because the Father is showing us, hey, you partake of the divine nature of my kingdom, of your sonship hidden in my son Yeshua. Therefore, you're going to be unmovable and unstoppable in all your ways. Joshua 1:8, this book of the law shall not depart of thy mouth, but you shall meditate it therein day and night, and it shall make you prosperous in all your ways. That word prosperous doesn't mean financial wealth like everybody teaches in the church realm. It means prosperous in all the ways, because you're prospering by speaking the same thing the Father is speaking and doing the same things he's doing. But we don't teach you that stuff, because if you're in the kingdom, you're ascending higher to be like the Father, but you got to go through many adversities, many trials and tribulations to enter into the kingdom. I have a lot of revelation right here, but if you go to but what's interesting is that in our sonship, our identity, the Father is still trying to speak to you and I, saying, in glorification, you cannot enter in, because you first must learn to come to your sonship, and you got to go through the death process. That death process is going to help you to identify you're dead to the fallen nature of Adam, and you're quickened and made alive in Yeshua, in Yahuah. Because in Genesis, you have the tree of life. In Psalms and Proverbs, you become the tree. But then in Revelation chapter 22, you also see the tree of life again. So there's a time and a season where once you see the tree, you partake of its fruit, and therefore you become the tree. The Father then plants you and seats you right where you need to be in Psalms chapter 1. And therefore, when you become and you mature more into your sonship, then people are going to come and want to partake of what you've gone through in life. So therefore, the generation of the first fruit perpetuates itself. It perpetuates the same sonship. It perpetuates the same identity of sons of the Father in you and I for the next generation. But what's interesting is that if you go to Revelation, there's the tree of life again. Revelation 22. Let's turn there. Hallelujah. Revelation chapter 22, verse 1 through 3. And it says, "And he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding from the throne of God and of the Lamb. In the middle of its streets and on either side of the river was the tree of life." Oh, so we just read in Genesis that there's a tree of life. In Psalms chapter 1 and Psalms 119, you become the tree. And then it says again, it's speaking to you and I both right now. You become the tree of life. Rivers of living water shall flow out of you. But he's also saying that people, when you come in your time and season and you're ready in and out of season, people are going to want to go partake of that divine nature, that divine fruit that you first partook of with the Father when you wanted to become who the Father is. So it says, verse 2, continue on. "In the middle of the street on either side of the river was the tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each tree yielding its fruit every month. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations." Imagination, broken relationships, father-son relationships, all those nations, all those ideologies, those nations inside of you that are broken, the Father's going to restore it and mend it. Even something that was never given to you, he's going to mend it. "And there shall be no more curse, but the throne of Yahuah and the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him." And it's not that kind of servant where it's kind of like, oh, I have servants, I paid the price, now I'm a pastor, now I'm going to have servants serving me. No. If you understand the Father in you, then you got to learn that you're going to serve them, because Yeshua came, and what did he do with his 12 disciples? He washed their feet. He came to serve. The greatest title you can ever have in the scriptures, in the kingdom, is to be called a servant son. And let's go on to verse 12 in Revelation 22. And he says, "And behold, I am coming quickly, and my reward is with me, to give to everyone according to his work. I am the Aleph and the Tav," but in King James he says, "I am the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Blessed are those who do his commandments, that they may have right of the tree of life and may enter through the gates into the city." Now, what's interesting is that if you're a Christian, you think commandments are living the commandments in the New Testament. What about the 10 commandments that the Father spoke to Moses in the time of Exodus? Those are commandments, and those are life-giving, life-bearing. But if you keep on seeing and saying, oh, we're not under the law, we're under grace. Grace does not permit you and does not allow you to be a trespasser of the law. Perfect example. You want to say you live by grace and you're not under the law anymore, then go ahead and stand, at a building that's 100 feet tall and continue to, just stand at the edge and then just walk off the edge and say, oh, I'm saved by grace through faith. I'm not under the law. I'm under grace. I'm under grace. Well, guess what? There are laws that the Father placed in that for you and I cannot trespass. That is called the law of gravity. If you're going on a freeway and it says speed limit is 70 and you're going 75, you're not going to, and a police officer comes and tells you pull over, you're going too fast, you're not going to tell the police officer, I'm not under the law, I'm under grace. Well, he said, oh, that's grace. That's great. Here's your ticket. You're still going to pay for it. But guess what? We all have to come under the law. We all have to come and submit unto the Father, because he is the author, developer, and finisher, excuse me, of our faith. Let me get some water. And I'm out. But what's interesting, it says, blessed are those who do his commandments. That's why I said, homologio. You want to enter into the kingdom? The church realm is in the holy court, but in the kingdom, well, excuse me, let me rephrase that. The church realm is in the outer court. You have believing believers and non-believing believers. And then in the holy place, you have the kingdom realm. That is where you have the sons, the disciples, willing to lay down their lives and become sons in the kingdom, that have the seal of authority, that have the seal of the father-son relationship hidden within them for a future generation to partake of that divine nature. And then in the Holy of Holies, you have sonship. That is where you and I are aiming and pressing towards the mark of the high calling. Yes, we got to go through a lot of stuff. We got to go through many ways of adversity to attain that. But the Father, his grace and mercy is new every day for us to partake of. We just got to press in more and more and put on righteousness. Seek ye first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added. But if you do all the commandments he said from Genesis all the way to Revelation, not from Matthew all the way to Revelation. He said Genesis all the way to Revelation. If you do all these commandments, you will be blessed and prosperous in all thy ways. Joshua 1:8. So until we see each other again, just want to say thank you for tuning in to H2HDI. This is In Tune with the Triune. I am your host, Elder Joshua Malara, and I want to help to esteem you, to encourage you into your sonship. Remember, these are perilous times we're living in, but the Father called you out and called you by name for you to become a royal priesthood, a peculiar people, a holy nation unto him. So until we see each other again, just want to say, don't forget to hit the like, the share button, hit the comment. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you didn't like. Let's break bread. Let's talk one another. And don't forget, we have our TerrorBites hosted by Apostle Robert Gonzalez, where he teaches you how to become a threat, a terror, and a revenger to the kingdom of darkness. Because there are two kingdoms. There's the kingdom of light and the kingdom of darkness. Which one do you stand? Where do you see yourself hidden? Do you see yourself hidden in the kingdom of darkness, which is a fallen nature that perpetuates a lie? Or do you see yourself as a son in the kingdom of light, returning and resurrecting from darkness into his marvelous light? Just a quick question. That was a question for you. Don't forget we also have our Let Isha Speak series that's hosted by Prophet Seer Virginia Gonzalez, where she teaches and encourages women, wives, and warriors always to put a smile on, and she always encourages you with the Psalms and Proverbs, and she speaks life because she partakes from the tree of life. And don't forget our Sabbath live stream from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m., where we have a very dynamic word, and it's always the Father speaking life. He's never speaking anything to condemn you when he's always speaking life. Life and death are at the power of the tongue, and those who love its fruit shall yield of it. I'm paraphrasing that one, but forgive me, I'll write that on the lower third and stand in correction, because as a son, we got to learn to be corrected. So if I said that scripture wrong, I'm very sorry, but here's the scripture in the lower third right here for you to research. So until we see each other again, shalom. Take care. Have a good night, good morning, and good evening, whatever time frame we're watching. Until we see each other again, shalom.